The United States is again confronting urgent questions about transparency, military conduct and the limits of force, as the White House faces escalating pressure to release video of a second strike carried out against an alleged drug trafficking boat in the Caribbean. What began as a routine national security talking point has now grown into a major political and legal storm, drawing in the president, the Pentagon, Congress, and multiple international human rights observers. At the centre of this controversy is a deadly sequence of events that unfolded on the 2nd of September 2025, when US forces targeted what they described as a narco-terrorist boat linked to the Venezuelan origin network known as Tren de Aragua. The administration initially celebrated the strike as a decisive blow against a violent transnational organisation. But over time, new details have emerged, and those details have transformed a once straightforward military action into one of the most contentious cases of the year. The heart of the dispute is the alleged existence of a second missile strike, one that, according to multiple reports, was launched after the initial explosion had already disabled the vessel and left surviving individuals in the water. Questions surrounding who authorized that second strike, why it happened, and whether it complied with US and international law have triggered congressional investigations and fueled accusations that top officials may have obscured the truth. In recent days, President Donald J. Trump has been repeatedly questioned on whether he will release video footage of the second strike, if that footage exists in full. When asked, he told reporters, "I don't know what they have." He made the remark while defending the overall campaign against seaborne drug smuggling networks, emphasizing that the White House sees its mission as one of national protection. That response, guarded, ambiguous and open to interpretation, has only intensified demands for clarity. Members of Congress from both parties want the administration to produce the footage. Several lawmakers argue that unless the video is made public, unanswered questions will continue to overshadow the operation and undermine public trust in the Pentagon's account. Central to those concerns is the reported involvement of Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, a key player in shaping President Trump's aggressive anti-drug maritime strategy. Hegseth has given differing public explanations of what he knew, what he authorized, and what he personally witnessed. At one point, he described observing the initial operation live and recognizing individuals on the boat. Later, he said he left the operations center before the second missile was launched and denied issuing an explicit order directing the follow-on strike. However, according to senior defense officials cited in multiple investigative reports, a classified communication indicated that Hegseth urged commanders to ensure that no one survived. One official told reporters that Hegseth had effectively stated that any survivors should be neutralized. This allegation triggered immediate controversy, partly because it goes to the heart of legal boundaries in military engagement. The Pentagon disputed that characterization, calling the reporting completely false. But the distinction matters deeply. If a high-level directive explicitly encouraged lethal action against individuals posing no active threat, it would raise serious legal questions. That is precisely why lawmakers are now demanding the original footage, all associated audio and internal communications related to the strike. The stakes extend far beyond a single military incident. For months, the EU has been carrying out an aggressive maritime campaign known internally as Operation Southern Spear, targeting vessels believed to be ferrying narcotics across the Caribbean and the Pacific. The operation has resulted in more than 20 strikes, with at least 83 people killed. The administration insists that these individuals belong to violent cartels that threaten Americans. But rights organizations and several Latin American governments argue that the US may have blurred the line between armed conflict and law enforcement. This specific case, the September 2 strike, has become the flashpoint because of the reported follow-on attack. According to investigative accounts, 2 individuals survived the initial explosion, clinging to debris in the water. Those individuals were allegedly killed in the second strike, raising questions about whether they posed any threat when they were targeted. Military ethics experts have said that if the survivors were defenseless and not taking hostile action, their killing could constitute a violation of both US rules of engagement and international humanitarian law. Families of several victims have already filed formal complaints. In Colombia, relatives of a fisherman killed in a separate strike presented a petition to the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, calling US actions unlawful and demanding accountability. They argue that not all individuals aboard these vessels are cartel affiliates and that the United States is conducting extrajudicial killings without proper oversight or assessment. Within the United States, legal specialists are also questioning the administration's reliance on the term narco-terrorist, which has implications for how the government justifies lethal force. Labeling a group as a transnational terrorist organization can widen the range of legally permissible military actions. But critics insist that simply branding a criminal network as terrorist does not automatically transform drug interdiction into an armed conflict. This blurred framework, part counter-terrorism, part counter-narcotics, part military deterrence, makes the question of the second strike even more delicate. Congress wants to know whether military force was used in a manner consistent with US obligations and whether the administration provided accurate explanations. Lawmakers have particularly focused their attention on Admiral Frank M. Bradley, the commander reportedly involved in executing the second strike. Bradley is expected to testify before committees that are examining what he knew at the time, what intelligence he relied on, and whether he acted on explicit directives or exercised independent battlefield discretion. Recent briefings from congressional staff indicate deep frustration. Some legislators have said privately that the Pentagon's responses feel evasive and overly sanitized. They want precise operational details: who knew what, who approved what, who saw what. The video, they argue, is the only conclusive evidence that can confirm or contradict the varying accounts. The White House insists that the strike was legal. Officials have pointed to classified intelligence indicating that the vessel was operated by a designated narco-terrorist group, claiming that this status grants broad authority to use lethal force. They argue that drug-running boats are often armed, pose imminent threats, and fund violent networks that operate globally. The administration continues to frame the September 2 operation as part of a larger strategy to dismantle transnational criminal organizations before they reach American shores. But that explanation has not quieted concerns. The presence of survivors after the initial strike complicates the legal narrative. Once a threat is neutralized, if the people in the water were in fact incapacitated, the use of additional lethal force becomes difficult to justify. The president's comment, "I don't know what they have," reveals uncertainty at the highest levels. If the White House truly does not know whether higher resolution video, drone feeds, or additional surveillance footage exists, then the Pentagon will face even greater scrutiny. Congressional investigators will almost certainly attempt to secure those materials directly, either voluntarily or through subpoenas. The political dimension is growing as well. Some allies of the administration argue that releasing the footage could compromise intelligence methods, expose operational tactics, or weaken the deterrent signal the US is trying to send. Others within the president's own party believe that withholding the footage will be more damaging, feeding narratives of secrecy and impropriety. Meanwhile, human rights organizations are preparing for a prolonged fight. Several groups are studying whether the incident could warrant international investigation. They argue that US operations in foreign waters, particularly actions that result in deaths, must adhere to strict legal standards, regardless of whether the administration labels the targets as narco-terrorists. Inside Latin America, the reaction has been mixed. Some governments, frustrated with the power of cartels, quietly welcome the aggressive US posture. Others fear that strikes conducted unilaterally in international waters risk escalating regional tensions and undermining sovereignty. The degree to which these countries believe the US respects international norms may influence future cooperation in counter-narcotics efforts. What remains constant is the gravity of the questions and the fact that none of them can be fully answered without transparency. If clear footage of the second strike exists, its release would immediately reshape the public and political understanding of the incident. If no footage exists, or if footage is too damaged to be useful, then the lack of visual confirmation will itself become a central storyline. For now, members of Congress say they will not drop the matter. They want details, dates, voice logs, communications, and chain of command clarification. They want to know whether decisions were made based on intelligence or impulse. And they want assurance that US military actions abroad, especially actions involving lethal force, adhere to the standards the nation claims to uphold. This is the broader context in which the president's remarks are being examined. When he said, "I don't know what they have," he underscored a major gap in communication between the Pentagon and the White House. That gap is now the focus of bipartisan concern. As investigations continue, the United States faces a difficult balancing act. It must demonstrate its resolve against violent transnational networks while also proving that its operations remain rooted in law. It must reassure allies while quieting critics. It must protect sources and methods while providing enough transparency to maintain legitimacy. And perhaps most urgently, it must answer the core question: what truly happened during that second strike? The coming weeks will determine whether the administration can substantively address these concerns or whether the controversy will widen into a defining test of military accountability under President Trump's second term.